Welcome to Al Bernstein Unplugged on Boxing. In a 40-year Hall of Fame career, Al has chronicled some of the greatest moments in boxing history. On this podcast, you get to hear him expand on those memories and talk about the current news in the sport of boxing. You also hear Al interview some of the biggest names in the sport. Here's Al Bernstein Unplugged.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. On this edition, we will be chatting with the great Larry Holmes, who, of course, is a legendary heavyweight champion who had a tremendous run, a 7-year reign as heavyweight champion, and he was one of the fighters that helped make the 1980s one of the most special decades ever in the sport of boxing. We will also, of course, answer some questions from you that you send to me on Twitter at Al Bernstein. So we want you to continue to send them to me. And by the way, I urge you to simply interact with me on Twitter. I enjoy interacting with boxing fans. And so when you have any questions or any comments, feel free to look me up on Twitter and we can have some convo, as they say. Well, to help me do everything on this show, I have a fine co-host. His name is Trip Mitchell, and we welcome him now. Hi, Trip. How are you?
I am good, Al, and just a really rough weekend for boxing fans, and with the passing of one of the truly greats, marvelous Marvin Hagler. And you heard about it prior to going on the air, and I, as usual, Showtime did a great job remembering him. But what a great champion and a better person.
Yeah, well put. That's exactly the way to put it. And yeah, we found out about it, I'm going to say for 30, 40 minutes before we were going to go on the air. And, or at least we confirmed it at that point. It had been rumbling around on the internet, but we wanted to make sure the story was true. And it was like a gut punch, just before having to do a show. And I have to be honest, I was devastated and crushed by it because I've known Marvin for, close to 40 years. And we had to scramble also to put together some of the tribute material that you're talking about. And it was hard, just getting emotionally past it to talk about it. I did many of Marvelous Marvin's fights during a portion of his career. First, when he fought Roberto Duran in 1983, and then, of course, the amazing night when he fought Tommy Hearns in 1985. I was honored and privileged to be at the mic for that amazing evening, and that fight was interesting on many levels. Obviously, first, it was extraordinary to see what he and Tommy Hearns did. And the other thing is, I was the guy who could have killed the Tommy Hearns Marvelous Marvin Hagler fight, or at least it would have been blamed on me, and I will explain. This was about 4 days before the fight, 3 days we were there, and I was going to do the last interview with Marvin for the broadcast, and they had to set up in the ring. We were going to sit in the ring to do it. And I started to go up the stairs to get into the ring. And for some reason, Marvin came right on my heels. And he was right behind me and he stepped on my heel, literally. And we both started teetering. And we were this close to both of us going down in a heap. And we managed to somehow keep our balance. We got in the ring and I was like, thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm going to be the guy responsible for this fight not happening. And Marvin winked at me when we were in the ring and said, well, that was my fault, but guess what? They'd have blamed you. and that is true. They would have. So that was a crazy story before that fight. And of course, the fight itself and everything that happened that night was legendary. One of the things about Marvin was that nothing was ever handed to him. He had to fight adversity forever in his boxing career, even after becoming a superstar. It took him 6 years to get a world title shot. Then when he did get a world title shot against Vito Anfermo, they stole the opportunity from him. When I say stole, I mean stole. Over 15 rounds, he won a minimum of 10 rounds, probably 11 in that fight. And for some inexplicable reason, he ended up with a draw against Vito Antuofermo. Dwayne Ford had a 4-point win for him, which was still close, in my opinion, closer than it needed to be. And two of the worst cards ever handed in by judges were given in by Dalby Shirley, who had Hagler losing by 2 points, and Hal Miller, who had the draw. Again, the two worst cards that I've seen handed in the last 40 years. It was, a travesty, needless to say. And Marvin Hagler then had to go on and win several more fights and finally won the championship in England against Alan Mintor. And even then, there was a riot at ringside after he won it, so he couldn't celebrate as much as he would like. The judges were always tough on Marvin Hagler. Against Duran, the fight I alluded to, it was a very close fight that he had to win the last round in order to win. And those judges' scorecards, in my mind, were askew. He won. He was certainly farther ahead than that in that fight. Then when he fought John Mugabe later in his career, second to last fight, they had the fight very, very close when he stopped John Mugabe. That was wrong. And finally, the final insult, Jojo Guerra's infamous scorecard in the Leonard-Hagler fight, where he had Ray Leonard winning 118 to 111, and Marvin Hagler lost a split decision in that fight. So for reasons known only to those involved overall in boxing, for some reason, he didn't always get the benefit of the doubt. Now, outside the ring and in every other way, Marvin Hagler was a straight shooter. That term was invented for him. He was universally respected in the boxing community, and he was, I think, had more integrity than almost anyone I've dealt with in the sport of boxing. And one of the stories that has been told after his passing, and it's a true story, is the one in which the Petronellis, Goody and Pat Petronelli, went to Marvin at a certain point and said, this was after his paydays had gone up to the 7 figures, and he was making a lot of money. And the Petronellis came to him and said, we think it would be fairer to you if we had a set fee at this point instead of taking a percentage. And which A, shows what kind of guys they were. And then B, we found out what kind of guy Marvin was, again, because his response to them was, absolutely not. I would never allow that to happen. And if you ever bring it up to me, I'll fire you. So you won't have to worry about the percentages. That was the kind of guy he was. He just did not want them to take less money. And as I said, he was loyal to them. They were his trainer managers for his entire career, fought in the same weight division his entire career, and he had the same dedication to the sport from the first moment he put on a pair of gloves to when he left the sport. And Trip, you'll appreciate this. You know my sister, Adie, who manages me, she and I were at a Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame dinner a couple years ago, and Marvin sat with us at our table, and he was sitting next to Adie, and I was on the other end of Adie, and I was chatting with somebody else for a while, and for a good 15, 20 minutes, Marvin and my sister were talking, and at one point Marvin taps me on the shoulder, and he said, hey, he said, after talking to your sister, I realized she knows more about boxing than you do. And then he winked at me, right? And so, of course, that's something my sister has never let me forget. But Marvin was, in my mind, one of the most enjoyable people in the sport to deal with. And, of course, he will be missed. And I think fans will miss him. They didn't have to know him. They're going to miss the great personality that he was in the sport of boxing.
Well, and one of the things that you had told about in an earlier story is when you were getting inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame back in New York, your son Wes, who was 10 or 12 at the time, hung out with three of the four kings
Yeah.
of boxing, and they treated him so well. And what a memory that has to be.
It was, we were in that. There's a little motel there where they put the inductees and some of the major boxing celebrities that have come, and Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns and Ray Leonard they were on the same floor as me, and during the time there, my son was about 12 years old, and they couldn't have been more solicitous and nicer to him. And he was having fun with them. And by the end, he was calling them Uncle Marvin, Uncle Ray, and Uncle Tommy. And it was just charming. And Marvin was a big part of that. And the last, when he was inducted into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, I was the MC of that event, and we shared some nice moments up on the stage. And that's the last time I got a hug from Marvin Hagler. And hugs are in short supply these days for everyone, and so I remember that very specifically. Well, from one legend, we will go to another, because our chat this week on this show is with the great Larry Holmes, of course, a legendary heavyweight champion who reigned supreme for 7 years in the division, made 20 title defenses, which is pretty extraordinary, and got a chance to visit with Larry and get his memories of his great career. Larry, you had an interesting beginning to your pro career because you only had a short amateur career, like 22 fights. But then while you were fighting as a professional, you really learned your craft by sparring with top heavyweights like Ali, Joe Frazier, Jimmy Young, Ernie Shavers. How beneficial was that to you, and what did it kind of show you about your potential?
It showed me a lot. Showed me that I can hang in there with anybody. If I can get in the ring with Ali or get in the ring with Joe Frazier or Ernie Shavers and those guys, I can get in the ring with anybody. And that's what I concentrated on.
Yeah, and I would think the beauty of all those guys is you saw all kinds of different styles that you would then, the kind of styles you'd face later as in your career.
Yeah, Ali had a different style, which is boxing, sticking the jab and moving and circling around the ring. Joe Frazier had a style that he's gonna come and knock you out. He don't back up for nobody. And same thing with Ernie Shavers and all that. So I was learning. The way they box, so I can get my stuff going, so I know how to back up because Ernie Shavers kept me backing up. I know how to go forward because Ali will make you go forward.
And great learning school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, the interesting thing that people kind of forget, and I was, right around, it was the beginning of when I was announcing boxing, so I remember it, and I was covering boxing for Boxing Illustrated and other publications when you won the heavyweight title before I got with ESPN. But doing stories about you, I remember this. You did not get your shot at a world title until your 28th fight, and you were 29 years of age. So you got it a little bit later. How did it impact you that even though you were certainly still a young enough guy and had a brilliant reign that lasted a long time, do you think that the fact that you had to wait and earn this opportunity made it even sweeter for you?
Yeah, you know what? I was kind of glad that I did wait because I got a chance to learn how to fight and learn how to fight different styles. And that was good. Even look out. Back there in those days, man, you was out there, man, you covered these guys and everything else, and you never wrote a bad article about me. So I liked you from the beginning, and I learned from that, man. I learned from that.
That's
stay cool.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. Go ahead.
No, and you created, when you won the world championship, you and Kenny Norton, and I remember being there at that in the pavilion in Caesar's Palace to write about that fight, and you and he created what I think is absolutely one of the best heavyweight championship fights of all time. Did you have a sense? Of course, it was a dogfight, but did you kind of know that you guys were creating a classic moment?
No, that wasn't a part of my thoughts. My thoughts would go out and win if I can.
Yeah, right.
And and Kenny Norton pushed me to that limit
Wow.
because he was on top of me every second, and he hit me a little below the belt, and I never forget it. And I said, "You hit me below. Keep it up. Keep the punches up." And he told me, he said a whole lot of bad words to me that I shouldn't say on the network.
Okay.
But
I
I
didn't
was,
know that. I did. Well, of
yeah,
course, you guys had a little history before that. There was an altercation at his training camp, and there was some other stuff. So I know it wasn't all fun and games before the fight.
no, he didn't love me, and I didn't love him either. But I respected him. I
Yeah.
respected him because you know, he was the champ, and he was the man that beat the champ. So I I paid it no mind and tried to keep on doing what I was doing. But Kenny Norton would never be out of my mind. Everybody said, "Who you for the championship?" Kenny Norton.
Yeah.
Tough fight.
Amazing. And it came down to the 15th round, and you guys produced one of the great rounds in heavyweight history. And you had a great second part of that round, which is what sealed the fight for you. In fact, that is probably what won the fight because it was to be decided. And those were 15-round fights. Hard to conceive of that, I think, for a lot of fans now. But for you, the two of you, the pace you fought at to get into that 15th round and produce that round was amazing. You had to finding that extra gear had to be difficult.
Well, I tell you what, your heartbeat was beating, and listen, you guys made the fight too because you covered it and you said some things maybe true and some of them wasn't true. And Kenny Norton, he was great. He didn't like me anyway. He was going to try to kill me. Even after the fight, it was just the same way. He still didn't want to say nothing to me.
That's interesting. Yeah, and of course that fight. I mentioned it was at Caesar's Palace, and that was in the pavilion. But then many of your fights, you fought 10 times at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and many of those fights, some of them were in the outdoor arena. The two of the biggest, of course, were against Muhammad Ali and Jerry Cooney, in which you literally made Las Vegas stand still, which those great fights did in the 80s. Sometimes people now that have, maybe weren't around during that era, they can't get the flavor of what it was like in Las Vegas in the 1980s for a big fight at Caesar's Palace. Can you describe a little bit about, as a participant, the way that moment felt to you?
Well, I still feel it. I mean, all these years later, I feel, oh man, what a fight I had.
Yeah.
And Kenny Norton put on a great show. He tried to kill me and knocking me out and all that stuff. And I was just trying to win the fight,
Yeah.
and
And
it kind
the city was alive during your big fights in Las Vegas. The 80s was an amazing decade, and a lot of that was you were responsible for a big part of that. The whole vibe of those events that you had were amazing.
yeah, Kenny was good. He was good, but he wanted to win. He wanted to be the champion. He beat Ali, which well, no matter what people say, he's in his mind he
Yeah.
beat Ali and didn't get it. Now he's gonna fight me and he's gonna knock me out. That's the only way he's gonna get to be the title, get that be the title. And he couldn't knock me out because I study him. I studied Kenny Norton. I watched him fight. I watch him, And I was not going to go that way. I was going to win the title because, a lot of people in Easton said, Larry Holmes, he's all right, but he can't beat Ken Norton. So I had to go through that here in my hometown. No, they was rooting for
Wow.
Ken
Some
Norton,
doubters even there?
Yeah.
Amazing. That's amazing. Now, you had two amazing fights with Ernie Shavers. The first one, you completely controlled and dominated the fight before you were champion. And the second one, you won and you ended up TKOing him. Of course, he knocked you down in that fight. And, he's a tremendously powerful puncher. Was he the most, I know Cooney also landed some good punches, and you've said he's a hard puncher. Was Ernie Shavers the hardest puncher that you faced?
That I fought. I fought. Jerry Cooney was next to that, but Ernie Shavers, with his style and with his ducking and whatever, and hitting him on his head, he had a hard head.
Yes, yeah.
He was not a cakewalk for Larry Holmes.
No.
And I stood in there with him, and he hit me, and I hit him, and I came out victoriously at the end. And then they had him there to throw Jerry Cooney on me. And I had to fight this guy. He's bigger than me, 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah.
And he punches hard as heck, and you go get him half of the money. Don't get no such thing as a parity with Jerry Cooney. Jerry Cooney wanted the lion's share, but we settled at the end of it for half of the money. And we put on a good fight. I think it's a great fight.
You brought that up, and I was going to ask about that. That was an extraordinary promotion on many levels. Some not so wonderful because there were people involved in the promotion. Though I don't think that you or Jerry were among them, and you guys have become good friends since then, which is great to see. And I love both of you guys, so I'm thrilled that you guys are good friends. But there was so much deliberately done to try and make that fight seem like a fight between the Great White Hope and Larry Holmes, and that had to be difficult to go through.
You had Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton or whatever in the corner throwing that garbage around in the air, so they had to hit
Rappaport and Jones, right?
Right, Rappaport and Jones. And they had to hit Jerry because he hit me,
Yeah.
And, that's why I said, when the bell rang, when I fought Jerry, when the bell rang, I said to Jerry, I looked at him and I shook his hand. I said, let's have a good fight.
Great.
And that's what we did. We had a good fight.
Yeah.
Jerry never forget that part there. And even when I was beating him up and start beating him up, taking advantage of it, he stood there like a man, and he took whatever I had to give him. Yeah.
Jerry, and it is interesting. And what some people forget is, and you made a point of it, that while Jerry Cooney didn't have quite they didn't really create the right buildup for him to fighting you because they didn't put him in against the toughest competition prior to it. He stepped up enough in that fight to do some very good things, and he's a powerful puncher. So your victory over him should never be discounted because as you point out, you're facing this big, tall, power punching heavyweight who, if they had handled him better, would have had a better career.
One of the things I did is got in a lot of arguments over that fight because when people say, "Oh, Jerry wasn't nothing. Jerry wasn't this, he wasn't that," I said, "I tell you what, if you'd have fought, he'd have knocked you out in 2 seconds." Yeah. Jerry was a puncher, man, and he can hit you. And I wanted to win the fight. I wanted to box him to win the fight because I knew he was a puncher, and I had seen what he did to the guys before me. And no, I was not going to stay there and take punches and trade with Jerry and get beat up. I was going to box Jerry, use my knowledge and what I learned from him in boxing, from Ali and Frazier, guys, and go get away with it, go out clean.
Yeah, you fought a great fight against him and got the win, and it was one of the more important ones in your career. You of course fought Muhammad Ali when he came back in the ring at I think age 38, and I've always wanted to ask you this, and I don't never really had an opportunity. During the lead up to that fight, in your mind, did you ever believe that Ali was going to bring the fight like some people started to believe he would, that he somehow had recaptured the magic at that age? Did you ever think he was a serious threat to you?
You know, tell you the truth, anybody who stepped in the ring with me, I thought they were serious because
Okay.
they was hitting me, they were throwing
Right.
punches, stuff like that. And Muhammad Ali was one of the guys that did that. And he talked to you crazy. You hit him, that did hurt. That did hurt. Just give me your best shot, you know. And it went on and went on and went on until, the referee stopped it. But no, Ali was my friend. He was a guy that can fight and he knew a lot of tricks. And I couldn't get myself to fall into all that mess that he was throwing out there because he was throwing them out there and he could punch. He got to be in that position by beating the number one contender, so the guy could fight, and he was champion of the world. And the guys that he fought, like Sonny Liston and all them guys, uh, he had to know what he was doing.
So even at that age, you felt there was danger there uh, uh, from him, and of course, you dominated most of that, virtually all of that fight. And so many people talk about the ending of that fight and how at a certain point you wanted the referee to step in, didn't you, to stop the fight?
Yeah, I told the referee, I said, listen, what I got to do? I got to kill him. I mean, I'm beating him up. I mean, because after the fifth round, he had started going down, and I was taking the shots, and he would take those punches, man, and
Yeah.
he said, come on, you ain't got nothing. Come on, my sparring partner, boy, you my sparring partner. Well, of course, I worked with Ali for 5 years
Right.
as a sparring partner, but Ali still had a lot of tricks up his sleeve, and I didn't want to take no chances, no chances.
Yeah. Well, you fought a brilliant fight. Did When you look back on it during the time, did you? Is it hard to see what? I mean, obviously, you made a lot of money for that fight, and you exorcised demons of this man that had preceded you and has a big shadow. But do you think you gained from beating Ali, or was it kind of a mixed bag?
Well, I think I gained,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of respect I got in the ring and out of the ring.
Mm-hmm.
People respected me
Yeah,
because
because of the way you handled it, right? Yeah.
I didn't beat him up, and and they knew, a lot of people knew that what I was doing, and I didn't have to beat him up. But a lot of people didn't like me because because I could beat him up. I was beating him up, and they said, "I hate you, I hate you."
Yeah.
What I do? You beat up Ali. Ali the man. You ain't the
Yeah.
man. You never be the champ. And I had to go through that. I said, but you know what? It was him or me. That's what I had to go through.
There's probably been very few fighters in the history of the sport who found themselves in a no-win situation as many times as you did, whether it was Ali, whether it was the Cooney fight in which, there was these overtones, whether it was the going after Marciano's record, or whether it's going after it, just it being there, and all the terrible insults you took and all the rest. So you were like in so many situations where you were damned if you did and damned if you didn't. And that had to be hard mentally to go through.
It was really hard. It was in no win situation. I win and I lose. What I want to do, go out and get knocked out
Yeah.
because you don't want me to break a record. Can't do that. I'm gonna go out there and fight. When God give me talent to fight, I'm gonna go out there and do what I gotta do. And it was hard, to the Marciano family and stuff like that. But it was never said that I was racist or whatever.
Yeah.
I fought him because he was the opponent. What color was he? I don't know what color he was. I think he was white, but it could have been black, as far as I'm concerned, because we was fighting. You know what I mean? my thing was not to look and judge him by the color, but judge him by the way he throw his punches. And it worked for me. And those that seen the fight know what I did, know that I let it go, and I didn't try to kill nobody. And all I wanted to do is win a fight.
Yeah. Yeah, you were great about being workmanlike and going about your business and tuning out the noise that oftentimes came. And as I say, some of it for you was difficult. You had through almost all of your career, most of your career, Don King was your promoter, and your relationship with him was a tricky one. When you look at it in total and assess it, what's your overall assessment of your relationship with him and the whole business mode of operation with him?
I tell you one of the things, I don't have hate for nobody. I don't inspire nobody. We went out there, we did what we had to do. Either Jerry win or Ali win or whatever, but I was doing what I had to do. And a lot of people was out there hating me because of that. But I didn't care. I wanted to win the fight, go home with my trophy, my wife and my kids. I said, I won the fight. And we had dinner and kept it quiet. We didn't want to be, I beat Larry Holmes, I didn't want that. I just wanted to be me.
And was King, when you look at your overall time with him, was he more beneficial than detrimental in the long run?
It's like Dave.
50-50?
Yeah, that's what he was.
All right, I get it. Yeah, I get it. You had 20 title defenses, which is extraordinary, and that, of course, is something that will forever put you in the boxing history books. But it is interesting. I think one of your greatest moments, and this may seem odd, came in a defeat when you were 42 years old and you fought Evander Holyfield and made him go 12 tough rounds. I remember being at that fight, and I was covering it for ESPN, and I got on SportsCenter and I said, this might be one of Larry Holmes' finest moments, even in losing, because you were older at that point, and you were 42, and you've managed to do that with Holyfield. I know, of course, the object is to win, but you must have felt that you acquitted yourself extremely well.
Yeah, I thought I did. I think I did good, but I didn't go into the fight to lose. I went in there to win, and I didn't care who I was fighting.
Yeah.
Vander Holyfield just got me one of those days that I wasn't really quite 100%. But we fought a good fight. He fought a good fight. He said some things that would try to upset me. Talk about, if it wasn't Marciano, it was Muhammad Ali, it was Ernie Shavers, it was Jerry. Because it was somebody always was throwing up to me. And why can't I just be me? That's all I want. I don't want to be nobody else. I don't want to, say that I'm better than anybody was better than anybody else. I just wanted to go out there and put on a good fight and hope that nobody got hurt in the fight. That's all I wanted.
Well, you did that against him, that's for sure. So you ended up fighting Mike Tyson right toward the end of your career, or at least.
You think it's too late?
Yeah, we could arrange that maybe. Let's think about that. They're doing a lot of those fights now, so maybe not. Oh, you might. Well, I saw you comment. You had a funny comment when they asked you how you would do against today's heavyweights, and you said, "Well, I'm 70 years old. You can't." 71. All right, there you go. But if you had fought Mike Tyson during your prime, how do you think that fight would have gone?
I don't want to take nothing away from Mike Tyson, but you wouldn't have heard of him. You might have heard of Mike Tyson. Listen, if he'd have came up in the crowd of people that I came up with, he had to fight those guys. He had to fight them Ernie Shavers. He had to fight them Kenny Norton. He had to fight them Ali. You know, he had to fight them guys that was going to hit him and try to hurt him, and then they're going to talk about it. Like, you know, that's what them guys wanted. They want bragging rights, and Mike Tyson would have gave them bragging rights. He won over me, so let him go out and defend it.
Yeah. Well, certainly you had the boxing skills that would have made it you know, you and he at the in your prime would have been you know, extraordinary fight, and your boxing skills. Does anybody in the sport of boxing that you see, that you have seen, who are some of the people, if there are anybody, that you would say have a jab that is somewhat comparable? You have perhaps one of the best jabs, well, for sure, one of the best jabs in the history of boxing. And I'm sure you admire people that can jab really well. Is there anybody that, or people that come to mind that you look at and say, wow, their jab's pretty impressive?
Yeah, I ran across a couple guys like that, and had a good jab, and I tried to teach them how to double it up and how to triple it up and how to counter off of it, and and that's it. But they don't want to use the jab. They want to go out and slug.
Mm.
You know, you got to use the jab, man. Get them. My thing, I always say, you got to make them drunk before you mug, and then you mug. You know.
Yeah.
So take your time, go out there and do what you got to do. Box, use your jab, use the jab. The jab will keep everybody right hand off your face if you throw it right.
And you just talked about, which I think is really interesting, with some people, they don't see that nuance. There are different ways to use the jab, and you use it for different purposes at different times in the fight, don't you?
Yeah, you listen, I use it up and down and around. That's the way to go, up and down and around. Because you got to use the jab. If you don't have a jab, you ain't got a fighter.
Yeah.
If you don't jab, you can't just walk in on somebody and knock them out. You got to set them up with that jab. Wow, jab, wow, pop, jab, pop. We used to say, cut the tree. We call him cut the tree, Big Jack. That's what my brother called me. Big Jack, cut the tree. Because Jack Johnson threw them jabs. And I was doing the same thing that Jack Johnson did. And I got away with it. But I learned as I went on, the jab was most important thing to use in the fight.
Yeah. Well, you had a great one. What, if you had to say the most satisfying moment of your career, or a couple of them, what would be the most satisfying for you?
Well, one of the things I wanted to do, and I did it, but I didn't want to do it that way, is Muhammad Ali, get him off my back. Because it was always, you ain't no Muhammad, you ain't no Muhammad. Muhammad would do this, Muhammad would do that
Right.
to me. And, you know, then we had to get him off my back, you know. And same thing with Ernie Shavers, you know, Kenny Norton. I had to get them off my back because people would have faith in these guys because they don't fault the Muhammad Ali's and everybody else in the world. And you want to see how I did do with them. Well, I've done it. Now you can judge me.
Yeah, you did. That's for sure. And those were all great moments. So one of the big successes you've had in life outside of the ring is that you and Diane have been married since 1979, and she is a wonderful woman, and you two have a wonderful partnership and have always had. So what's the secret that you want to tell the world about how to have such a long-lasting and happy marriage?
Never say no.
The husband, just don't ever say no to your wife, right?
Don't say no. You know, she wanted it, go get it. She wanted a new car, go get it. You know what I mean? But my money is running kind of low now, so you can't just go do that no more. But
you may at some point have to actually say no. Is that it?
yeah, you have to say no. She understands it. She understands. Hey, 30 years I've been married. 30 years I've been married to her. So I don't even know how many years I've been married.
Yeah, well, since '79, however many, it's a long time. Yeah, you two have had a wonderful relationship, and a partnership. It seems like, and she's been how would you describe her as a force in your life?
She's always praying and always saying one for me. And I said, "Did you say one for me?" I always say one for you. Don't even worry about it. And she's been a great girl. And I got two kids. One of them is 40, I think. I don't know. And my son, he's 38 or 39, whatever. I got a great family, and they know and they do right. They all educated. Something that I'm not. I'm not educated. They're educated. They went to school. They graduated. They went to college. I'm a dropout, man. That's how I.
Well, yeah, but let's also clarify that you had to quit school in the 7th grade because you were in a family of you have 11 brothers and sisters,
Mhm.
and you had to help your mom, who was a single mom at that point. You had to go to work, and so uh, you took the hard route to help your family, correct?
Yeah, I don't want to take all the credit for that, but everybody did.
Yeah,
Everybody in the house had to help out. You
yeah.
know, you had to go out there and pick cotton. You go pick cotton. You go out there pick apples. You pick apples. You do whatever you got to do to bring food into the house so that
Yeah.
guys can sit down at the table and eat. And that's
Well,
what we did.
your character was forged from that, I'm sure. So you've done something that's kind of interesting, and you alluded to Easton before. Not too many people have put a town on the map, which you've done. If anybody says Easton, Pennsylvania, there's only one thing that they're going to think about. While the town has other attributes and there are other charms, at the end of the day, they're going to think about Larry Holmes. You put that town on the map. They erected a beautiful statue of you, which is wonderful. You got a street named after you, and I think people will appreciate it. But it must make you feel kind of proud that you are responsible for making a city known to the world.
Yeah, I am really. I'm proud. But you know what? But people crazy. They don't care. They don't care what you did or who you are or who
What
you.
have you done for me lately, huh?
Yeah, you know what I mean. So you just keep on doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
and the good will come back out of it, and just be. I love Easton. I love Easton because I can ride down the street to those stores and stuff like that. It takes 10 minutes to do that. And I ain't got to fight nobody, ain't got to argue with nobody. But sometimes you get a wise guy, oh, Larry Holmes, and give me the finger and stuff like that. But I don't care, I got now I am too old for that.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm sure that 99.9% of everybody in Eastern Pennsylvania is grateful that Larry Holmes was born and grateful that Larry Holmes did so many wonderful things to give that city its recognition. And I'm sure they're proud of your efforts, as they should be. And Larry, I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. I remember those times in the '80s when I would cover your fights for SportsCenter. Ironically, I hardly ever got to announce your fights because they were on different networks than I was on. I finally got to announce a fight of yours a million years into your career against Butterbean, of all people. That was way after your championship run. But I was privileged to cover many of those. And the one thing I regret. You and I were both doing a lot of music in Las Vegas. You had your music group and I was performing. We never did a duet. Now, that's a shame, right?
We get it together. Why we get together?
We got to do that. If you come out to Vegas, I'm still performing out here. You got to come out and we're going to get together and do a duet.
What hotel you in?
I usually perform at the Tuscany hotel. So we're going to get you out there and we're going to see if once the COVID thing is well in hand, we'll all four go out to dinner and you can come over and we'll do some songs.
Yeah, we'll have a good time.
All right, Larry, thank you so much. And I appreciate you sharing your memories with us.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. My wife thanks you. My kids don't even know who I'm talking to, but I thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Larry. Take care.
All right.
So there was my chat with Larry Holmes. Loved hearing him relive those memories and talk about all the big fights he was in. And I love his advice on, he's been married since 1979 to his wife, Diane. And I love the advice he gave on how to have a good marriage. Just say yes to your wife all the time. Now, does that work for you, Trip, or no?
Well, I'm let's see, 15 months into
Yeah.
it, so I can agree. Yeah.
Yeah, you are still a newlywed virtually. So
Yes,
so
indeed. But saying yes is a good thing.
yeah, you've already had enough practice saying yes. Yeah, I've been married for over 25 years, and I am I'm a yes man. So Larry's advice was not lost on either of us. That's for sure.
And real quick before we get to the question, I remember interviewing Larry, and he said a word that you cannot say on national radio twice.
Yeah.
And how do you admonish the baddest guy on the planet? There's nothing you can say.
No, you can't. You can't say that. Yeah, it was. You can't do that. But he is a guy that speaks his mind, and that is evidence of it. What do you say we dig into a question that we've got from one of the of our viewers and listeners?
Okay, Green Key Mort asks, how do you feel about SOG, or who would be Son of God, or Andre Ward? How would Andre fare against Canelo Alvarez if he came out of retirement? Great question.
It is a good question, and I think I'm going to deal with it two different ways, even though part of it wasn't asked. I'm going to first talk about how I think a fight between Andre Ward and Canelo Alvarez would have gone if they could somehow magically fight during Andre Ward's prime, when he was a 168-pound champion, and we had him in our Super 6 tournament. And of course, beyond that as well, he fought as a 168-pounder. And I think it would be a fascinating match because Canelo is a counterpuncher who likes to control the pace of fights, has a granite chin, and has power. Andre Ward was a chameleon. He knew how to win. Winning was everything to him. And so to do that, he was not afraid or resistant to the idea of changing what he did fight to fight, sometimes round to round. And I remember them fighting Alan Green in the Super 6 tournament, and he and Virgil Hunter had deduced that the best way to beat Alan Green, who was a big puncher, was to not give him room to throw his punches. And Andre Ward did something I hadn't really seen him do before. He literally turned himself into the quintessential inside fighter. He made it rough and tumble on the inside. He threw short punches, uppercuts, little chopping right hands, muscled Green, and won the fight that way. And Andre's a great guy, but in the ring he was, while I wouldn't say he broke the rules, he wasn't afraid to bend them occasionally. And so he can make fights rough and tumble. I think that is the strategy that he would employ if he were to fight Canelo Alvarez. And I think it would be an interesting one to use because he would want to get on the inside, disrupt Alvarez, try to push him, try to not give him room to land the counter punches that he wants to land. And I think, while I have tremendous respect for Canelo Alvarez, and I think he's a terrific fighter, at the end of the day, I believe Andre Ward would have prevailed. Now, right now, if he came out of retirement after a long, long layoff and right off the bat fought Canelo, I think it would be a much heavier lift for him. I think he would still try and employ those tactics that I talked about, and I think it would be a tough one for him. And I think he would make the fight competitive, and it would be really interesting. But I think it would be difficult for him to win now coming out of retirement at this juncture. Although you never want to count Andre Ward out. You learned that. And, of course, he barely knew what defeat felt like. He was undefeated as a pro, though he did have the one controversial loss to Sergey Kovalev. And as an amateur, he didn't lose for, I think, 5 years of his amateur career going into the pros. So I used to joke that he was undefeated for about 4 presidential administrations, but he didn't know how to lose. Another guy who's a winner is Tommy Ankello, who has a wonderful YouTube channel called World Class Boxing, where he gives you a lot of videos that explain the sport of boxing. They're semi-instructional. He's a trainer, of course, and many young amateur boxers look at it. And if you and I are an amateur boxer and you want to look at, or an aspiring boxer, and you want to look at how the technique of boxing can be explained and taught, it's a great site to go to, a great channel. And even if you're just a boxing fan that wants to understand the sport better, going to that channel would be a good one. Next week, Trip, we are going to have an interesting show, because we're going to have two people on. We're going to have Rais Salim, who's one of the best 122-pound fighters in the world today, and his promoter, Marshall Kaufman. And part of the reason we wanted to have Marshall on is because I think it'll be interesting to see the dynamics of a promoter. And Marshall has been a promoter for a long time, promoting at, he's not the Golden Boy, he's not Matchroom Boxing, Top Rank Boxing, or PBC. He's one of those promoters in boxing who are the lifeblood of the sport. He does regional shows, mostly on the East Coast, and develops young fighters like Rais Salim. And I think it'll be interesting to talk to him about how that process works, while we have Rais there, who, by the way, is a really interesting and thoughtful guy, and kind of find out about that dynamic. That's the part of the sport that maybe people don't always get to see.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be fun, and as usual, we'll learn something.
Yeah, hopefully we will. And it'll be, I think it'll be an interesting show, to be sure. Now, we want to urge everybody, if you have not seen past episodes of the show, you can go on our YouTube channel to see it. You can go to bingenetworks.tv to see it. Fight TV, you can go back and look at episodes we have from the past. And one of our last episode was one that I think you'd get a kick out of if you missed it, and that is the show we had in which Snoop Dogg came on and talked about his upcoming venture of April 17th in boxing, the Fight Club, and also talked about a lot of other fun things. Trip, always good to see you, and thanks for sharing the mic with me.
I've enjoyed it, and your remembrances of Marvelous Marvin Hagler were very profound. And again, nice job with the whole Showtime crew doing something that's doing a professional fight after you hear something that really affects you.
Yeah, it was an interesting night because of that, because the emotions were we're wearing them on our sleeve when we started the show. So thanks for those comments. Well, we thank you for watching and listening. Thanks also to Larry Holmes, of course, for joining us. Thanks to the folks at Let's Do Something Productions, especially our man Chris. And we will see you next time.